The car that made Nicolas Cage look cool, no small feat, and turned a Mustang into the most wanted vehicle on the planet. Eleanor didn't just appear in a movie, she became a religion. And then she disappeared into a legal nightmare so complicated it took decades of courtrooms, estate battles, and very angry lawyers to even begin to untangle. This is the true story of what happened to Eleanor after the camera stopped rolling, and it is messier, stranger, and more fascinating than anything that happened on screen. Hi, my name is Johnny, and this is American Muscle, the original Eleanor, the 1971 film you forgot existed before we talk about the 2000 remake and Nicolas Cage and Angelina Jolie looking impossibly good. Leaning against a Shelby, we need to go back, way back. Back to a man that most people under 40 have never heard of. And that is a genuine injustice. H.B. Halicki. Toby Halicki. The man was a one-person film industry operating out of Long Beach, California, and in 1971 he wrote, directed, produced, starred in, and performed most of his own stunts in a car chase film called Gone in 60 Seconds. He also sourced all the vehicles himself. He also arranged all the crashes himself. He also, in the film's climactic chase sequence, destroyed approximately 93 cars over the course of about 40 minutes of real, unscripted, deeply dangerous driving through the streets of Southern California without permits, without road closures, and, one assumes, without a great deal of concern for what the city of Long Beach thought about any of it. The Eleanor in that film was not a Shelby GT500. She was a 1973 Ford Mustang Mach 1, painted yellow, and she was Halicki's personal car. He built her, he drove her, and over the course of production, he destroyed her repeatedly and fixed her again by the next morning. Sound familiar? If you watched our Dirty Mary Crazy Larry episode, it should. Halicki was already developing a sequel when he was killed on set in 1989. A cable attached to a water tower snapped during a stunt sequence, the tower collapsed, and that was it. He was 48 years old. The sequel never happened. The original Eleanor stayed in the hands of his estate, and the name, the character, the concept of Eleanor, all of it went with her. That detail is going to matter enormously in about 10 minutes. Keep it in the back of your mind. The remake and the birth of an icon. Jump forward to 1998. Jerry Bruckheimer, the man responsible for more American popcorn cinema than possibly anyone alive, acquires the rights to remake Gone in 60 Seconds. The director attached is Dominic Sena. The cast eventually includes Nicolas Cage, Angelina Jolie, Robert Duvall, Giovanni Ribisi, and Vinnie Jones, who is Vinnie Jones in every film he has ever made, and I mean that as a compliment. The plot, for the three of you who haven't seen it, involves a retired car thief named Memphis Raines, who is forced to come back for one last job, stealing 50 cars in one night to save his brother's life. Eleanor is the last car on the list, the one that's always gotten away, the white whale with a supercharger. Now, the production needed an Eleanor that would justify everything the script was building toward. This couldn't just be a nice Mustang. It needed to be the Mustang, the one that made audiences understand immediately without a single word of explanation why this car in particular had haunted Memphis Raines for years. The production chose a 1967 Shelby GT500, and that choice was not arbitrary. The 67 GT500 sits at a very specific intersection of era and attitude. It is old enough to feel genuinely dangerous, from a time when horsepower ratings were honest and crumple zones were not yet a concept anyone had gotten around to inventing. It is also, visually, close to perfect. The long hood, the fastback roofline, the proportions that look like someone drew a car by instinct rather than by committee. The man brought in to build Eleanor for the production was Chip Foose. If you are a car person and you just made a noise reading that name, I understand completely. Chip Foose is one of the great automotive designers and customizers of his generation, and his fingerprints on the 2000 Eleanor are everywhere. The custom bodywork, the extended front valance, the hood scoops, the side scoops, the torque thrust style wheels, the pepper gray paint, which is not a factory color and which Foose developed specifically for the film, Eleanor did not come from a showroom looking like that. She was built to look like a car that had been obsessed over, modified, and perfected by someone who understood exactly what they were doing, which, when you think about it, is exactly what Memphis Reigns would have done. The total build produced a car that hit somewhere between 500 and 550 horsepower, depending on which production source you believe. This was not a prop car. It was a working, breathing, deeply fast machine designed to be driven hard on camera and to look spectacular doing it. And it did. How many Eleanors were actually built? Here is something the movie never tells you. And the marketing materials were not exactly shouting from the rooftops either. There was not one Eleanor. There were not two Eleanors. For the production of Gone in 60 Seconds, approximately 11 cars were built to Eleanor spec. Let me say that again. 11. Now, not all 11 were identical in purpose or configuration. This is how big productions work, and if you watched our Cobra Mercury episode, you already know the breakdown. Some are hero cars, some are stunt cars, and some exist purely to be destroyed. The hero cars, the ones used for close-up work, interior shots, anything requiring the camera to actually live with the vehicle at close range, were built to the highest standard. Full chip foos bodywork, full drivetrain, the complete package. These are the cars the audience fell in love with. The stunt cars were built to the same exterior specification, but configured internally for the demands of the sequences they were assigned to. High-speed runs, the famous freeway chase, the jump sequences. These cars took the punishment so the hero cars didn't have to, and some cars were built specifically to be wrecked. Picture cars, the industry calls them. Dressed to match and designed to absorb the kind of impact that would end a hero car's useful life in a single take. Of the 11 cars built for production, by the end of filming, several had been significantly damaged or destroyed. The specific number depends on which production account you believe, but the consensus among researchers who have tracked these vehicles is that somewhere between 4 and 6 cars survived filming in condition worthy of preservation or sale. That is a meaningful number because it means multiple Eleanors entered the post-production pipeline, and their stories from that point diverged dramatically. The legal war over Eleanor's name. And here is where this story stops being a car story and becomes a legal thriller. Buckle up, because this part is genuinely wild. When H.B. Halicki died in 1989, his estate passed primarily to his wife, Denise Halicki. Denise had been deeply involved in the original production. She understood the property. And critically, she understood what it was worth, or what it was going to be worth once Hollywood came calling. When Bruckheimer's production acquired the rights to remake Gone in 60 Seconds, part of that deal involved agreements with the Halicki estate. Denise signed off on the remake. The production moved forward. Eleanor became a global icon. And then the merchandise started. The replicas started. And Denise Halicki started paying very close attention to exactly who was using the Eleanor name, the Eleanor look, and the Eleanor legacy to make money without her permission. Here is the legal foundation that made her case so powerful. Eleanor is a trademarked character, not just a car design, a character. Denise Halicki successfully argued in court that Eleanor, the name, the look, the concept of the car, as a character with a name and a personality, belonged to the Halicki estate, and that argument held up. The implications of this ruling were enormous and, depending on your perspective, either entirely just or completely maddening. Because what it meant in practical terms was that any shop building an Eleanor replica, any seller listing an Eleanor clone for sale, any builder advertising their car as an Eleanor tribute, was potentially infringing on a trademark held by a private estate. The cease and desist letters started going out. Shops that had been building Eleanor replicas for years suddenly found themselves on the wrong end of legal action. One case that made significant waves involved a custom car builder who had sold what he advertised as an Eleanor replica and was subsequently sued by the Halicki estate. The case wound through the courts for years, and I want to be transparent here about something. The legal landscape around Eleanor replicas is genuinely complicated, and it has shifted at different points depending on specific rulings and settlements. What is not complicated is this. The Halicki estate has been aggressive and consistent about protecting the Eleanor trademark, and that aggression has fundamentally shaped what happened to the production cars, how they were sold, how they were documented, and how they have been valued in the collector market. An Eleanor that can be verified as a screen-used production vehicle from the 2000 film is not just a valuable car. It is a car whose provenance protects the buyer from the very legal exposure that building a replica would create. You are not infringing on anything. You own the real thing. That distinction adds a floor to the value of genuine production cars that does not exist for any replica, regardless of how faithful the build. And Dennis Halicki has been very clear, very public, and very consistent about which cars are real and which are not. She has served as something of an unofficial authenticator for genuine production vehicles, which gives her a state ongoing relevance in the market for these cars even decades after the film was released. Where the production cars actually ended up. So, where did the actual production Eleanors end up? The most documented sale of a hero car from the production came in 2013 at the Mecum Auctions Indianapolis sale. A car with documented production history and certification from the Halicki estate came across the block and sold for $850,000. Let that number sit for a second. $850,000. For a car built on a 1967 Mustang fastback chassis that started life as a factory vehicle worth a fraction of that. The provenance is doing enormous work in that number. Strip away the Eleanor history, and you have a very nice late 60s Mustang with a custom build. Keep the Eleanor history, document it correctly, certify it through the estate, and you have a car that approaches 7 figures at a major auction house. A second verified production car surfaced several years later and sold privately, with the sale price not publicly disclosed. Based on the trajectory of the collector market and the Mecum sale, informed estimates in the automotive press place the figure somewhere in the same neighborhood, possibly higher, given how the market for significant film vehicles has moved since 2013. Now here is where I have to be straight with you, because this channel does not deal in speculation dressed up as fact. Of the 11 cars built for production, the documented public sales account for a small number. The rest have moved through private channels, through estate arrangements, through quiet transactions that never generated headlines or auction catalog entries. Some of those cars are almost certainly in private collections right now, with owners who know exactly what they have and have no particular interest in selling. That is not unusual. When a car carries this kind of cultural weight and this kind of legal complexity around the name, private custody is often the rational choice. You own something significant. You know it. The people who matter know it, and you do not necessarily want the attention that comes with putting it on a public stage. Some of those cars, and this is the part that should make film preservation people genuinely uncomfortable, may have passed through enough hands that the documentation has degraded. Not deliberately, just the ordinary entropy of ownership. Each new owner knows a little less than the last one. The paperwork gets separated from the car. The story gets fuzzy. The replica problem and the car show circuit. And then there is the replica problem. And honestly, the sheer scale of it is something that does not fully hit you until you start looking. There are, conservatively, hundreds of Eleanor replicas in existence right now, possibly significantly more than that. At car shows from Pomona to Pebble Beach, on Barrett-Jackson preview lots, in private garages across every state in the continental United States, there are 1967 Mustang fastbacks wearing pepper gray paint and Chip Foose-inspired bodywork, long hood, fastback roofline, side scoops, torque thrust wheels, the whole package. And the vast majority of them have absolutely nothing to do with the actual film. Not a single frame, not a single shoot day. Built from scratch by enthusiasts who fell in love with the design and wanted one for themselves. And look, I get it completely. If you handed me the budget and the garage space, I would probably be building one right now instead of making this video. The 2000 Eleanor is one of the genuinely great American automotive designs of the last 25 years, and the fact that it came out of a film production rather than a factory does not make it any less real as a design achievement. Chip Foose put something into that car that people responded to on a gut level, and that response has never gone away. So, I am not here to throw shade at the replica community. Serious builders have put serious money and serious craftsmanship into Eleanor tributes that are, by any objective measure, extraordinary machines. Building one is a completely legitimate expression of enthusiasm for everything that car represents. But here is the problem, and it is a real one. Without documentation, without a verifiable chain of custody, without certification from the Shelby estate, you cannot tell from visual inspection alone what you are actually looking at. Is it a production car? Is it a licensed replica built with estate approval? Is it something assembled last year in a shop in Burbank using a body kit and a YouTube tutorial and a whole lot of optimism? Standing in a parking lot on a Sunday morning, you genuinely cannot know. They can look identical, and that creates exactly the kind of market environment where very convincing vehicles exist right alongside legitimate ones. And the entire difference between them lives in a folder of paperwork that may or may not exist and may or may not be accurate. This is precisely why the Shelby estate's role as authenticator carries so much weight. A certified production Eleanor and a beautifully built replica can share the same parking space, wear the same paint, carry the same proportions, and turn the same heads. One of them sold for $850,000 at the Mecum in 2013. The other one is worth a fraction of that. The metal does not tell you which is which, the paper does. And in a market flooded with Eleanors, the paper is everything. Is it possible that a genuine screen-used Eleanor is sitting somewhere right now with an owner who has no idea what they actually have? Not just possible, probable. This is not a dramatic claim. This is just what happens to film vehicles, over and over again, across every era of Hollywood production. It happened with the SVT Lightning trucks from the first Fast and Furious film, two trucks that hauled the parts used to build the most famous Supra in cinema history, sitting in private hands for over 20 years with owners who had no idea. Furious Garage got there just in time on one of them. One more day, and it would have been parted out permanently. Gone. Irretrievable. It happened with the Dirty Mary Crazy Larry Charger that is sitting right now in a backyard in Sun Valley, California. Original paint, original stripe, original wheels. A car that outran a helicopter on screen and is currently getting rained on behind someone's house in the San Fernando Valley, while the collector market would pay $500,000 for it without blinking. It happens because the film industry is not in the preservation business. It is in the production business. Movies get made, cars get used, productions wrap and move on, and nobody stops to flag the vehicles that are going to matter to people 25 years later. The system is not designed for that. It never has been. So an Eleanor that passed through enough hands, whose paperwork got separated from the car somewhere along the way, whose story got a little fuzzier with each new owner, could be anywhere right now. A storage unit in the valley, a barn in the Central Valley, a collection where it was purchased as a high-quality replica and has simply never been examined closely enough to reveal what it actually is. Here's the thing about that last scenario that should make you sit up slightly. The VIN does not change. The production modifications do not unmake themselves. The truth is built into the car, waiting in the metal for whoever is paying close enough attention to find it. If you have a credible lead, the comments section is open. These stories get solved by the people watching them, I mean that. Eleanor is the rare movie car that transcended the film, that made her famous and became something larger. She is a shorthand now. Say the name to anyone with even a passing interest in American muscle cars, and they know immediately what you mean. That does not happen by accident. It happens because the car was right. The film put her in front of the right audience at exactly the right moment, and the build that Chip Foose produced was genuinely, durably beautiful in a way that holds up 25 years later. But the story behind what happened to the actual production cars is not a clean story. It is a story about trademark law and estate battles, and the gap between cultural mythology and physical reality. It is a story about how the most famous Mustang in cinema history became simultaneously priceless and legally complicated to even reference by name without permission. It is a story about cars that moved through the world quietly after the spotlight left them, some to auction blocks and private collections, some to uncertain fates, and at least one that might be out there right now, waiting to be found. 11 Eleanors went into production. The full accounting of all 11 has never been publicly completed, and somewhere in that gap is a story worth finding. I'm Johnny, this is American Muscle. If this one hit different, drop a comment below and subscribe so you do not miss what we are covering next. We chase these stories to the end of the road, and we are just getting started. See you in the next lane. See you in the next lane. See you in the next lane.